Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using the new stamp set from Wandering Rabbit called Penny and Her Friends Halloween. As soon as I saw this stamp set, I knew I wanted to make some ATC cards with them. So I've actually already printed out these images, but I'll be doing two separate tutorials, including the coloring and the actual making of the ATC cards themselves. But this particular tutorial, I'm going to be making the ACT book. So I've got this ATC Book Die Set from Whimsey Stamps. So I'm going to be using that to cut out the actual book part and this little insert that you can actually then slot your ATC cards in, and then we'll be making the cards later with these images. I'll also be using the Web Stencil from La La Land Crafts for my actual ATC card. So I've just grabbed some smooth white cardstock and I'm going to run these two dies through my die cutting machine to actually create my book. So you've got the book panel and then this little insert to make a little slot for your ATC cards to sit in. So in this tutorial I'll also be finishing off the front of my ATC book. So I've actually printed out the front door that comes with the Penny and Her Friends Halloween set and also printed onto some masking paper. So I'm going to be doing a brick wall stencil behind. So I've just grabbed out a pencil and my T ruler and I'm just going to work out where I want my brick wall to start. So I'm lining it up with this step. So just going to use that T ruler to make sure I get a straight line, and now I know where to cut it out to create my stencil where I need that covered. So I did fussy cut that off camera. So now I'm just going to line up my stencil with my image and obviously the bottom of my wall, and we're going to get some stenciling done. Now I've grabbed out my Make Art station. I'm just going to attach my panel to the top, then grab the MFT Slimline English Brick Wall stencil and just get that attached with my magnets. Now I actually want to create a textured wall, so I've grabbed out some texture paste, but it is white, so I do want to dye it color into a red brick. So I've grabbed my Distress Oxide fired brick and I'm just going to pop a bit of that on my glass mat and mix that through with my texture paste to get a colored texture paste in the brick color that I'm wanting. So the great thing about this craft mat is that I can just mix things up. I'm actually enjoying making a mess. It's like being a kid again. And I just keep adding color and just moving that texture paste around until I've got the color that I'm wanting. So I'm just kind of like just mixing it all together and just scraping it all into one spot, and then just using my Nuvo silicone palette to actually now put that onto my brick stencil. So I'm just kind of scraping that across, scraping that off my mat, making sure that the color is even and just making sure that I'm getting a smooth coverage. Now I didn't have quite enough, so I do end up putting a little bit more of the texture paste and the brick, fired brick ink onto my pad, just to make sure that I've got enough space, enough of that texture paste to go over my whole brick wall. So again, just mixing that through, making sure that I've got enough, and then we'll get that brick wall finished off and just ensure that that's nice and smooth, and it just creates this beautiful brick texture on our panel. So I'm just going to pull that stencil off very carefully. It is still wet, but I just wanted to make sure that that doesn't get stuck down. And now I'll just set that aside to dry. I'm going to do some stenciling on my ATC book using the Web Stencil from La La Land Crafts. So I'm going to pull that out and get that ready, but I'm wanting the front of my book to be plain because that's where I'll be sticking my image of our front door and sentiment. So I've grabbed out some masking paper and I'm just going to cut that to size, and I'm going to use the straight edge that comes with it to line up with the score line on the actual front of the book panel. So I'm just lining that up on my Make Art station so that that's right on that fold line, nice and straight. And now we can get our stencil ready to do our stenciling on the back side. So I'm just going to line that up using the magnets to hold that stencil in place, and I'll be using my black soot and my dome sponge applicator to get that all inked up. Now I like to use the white cardstock because then that shows white through with the actual spider's web itself, but you could use black cardstock and then use your Versamark watermark ink and some white heat embossing powder if you prefer to do that and add a little bit of texture. But I just wanted to do a really quick one today, so that's why I thought it's easier to use white cardstock and just dye that with the black soot ink. So you can see just how beautiful those spider web lines show through. I'm just going to ink up my tab so that's nice and black to kind of match in with my base. And I'm also going to use the same spider web stencil to also put some spider webs inside my ATC book with that little holder where my ATC cards will sit. I'm just working in circular motions to make sure that I get a nice smooth coverage of the black soot and that it gets into all of those little openings of our spider's web. And I keep just going back and forth to make sure that I've got a good amount of coverage with the black, and we'll also do the other side as well and set that aside to dry. I'll just pull off my masking tape to reveal the front of our book. So you could leave it like that and have a nice crisp white front. But as you'll see later, after I pull this masking paper off our brick wall, now that that's dry, and I just want to cut that down to size to fit on the front, I've grabbed out a rectangle die that is perfect from my stash. And I'm just going to line that up, centering that sentiment down the bottom. Just grab some purple tape once I'm happy with the position, and we'll run that through our die cutting machine. Now when I pop that actual picture on the front, I think it just kind of gets a little bit lost with the white. So I'm going to use that masking paper again just to seal off our spider web to make sure none of our little white spider's web gets covered. And I'm just going to use the same black soot to just color that up. So while that's drying, I'm just going to do some coloring of our actual door mat and floor. So I've grabbed out all my markers, and I will have them all showing in the top left hand corner and all listed in the description box below. So where each of those lines of the door are, they'll be throwing a little bit of a shadow, so that's why I've put my shadow also where the door frame is on the either side and also the top, which will be throwing a shadow. And now I'm using my R29 just to blend out that darkest color of R89, and we'll go along that top to blend that out. Our next color we'll be using is R27 to blend out the R29, and just going on either side of where that shadow is to blend out that color of the E29, and making sure we don't miss that top part. And then we'll come in with our final color, the R24, to fill that complete door in. So now you can see all those panels throwing a little bit of shadow for where they all join up on that timber door. So we'll make sure we don't forget up the top of our little bat knocker. And now we'll do our door frame and also our bat knocker. I'm going to do them both the same in ends. So I've got my end marker N8. So there will also be quite a shadow around our door frame. So I'm going to do that fully in the N8. And then also put a little bit of N8 down the bottom where that will be quite in shadow on our door frame. And also underneath our door there. Now I'll blend that out with the N6 and flick up to our white cardstock, and where our lightest color will be at the top, and the lightest color will be our N4. So just flicking that up to the top. The top will be fully light because I'd say they've got their outside porch light on, and I forgot to do the knocker, so obviously N8 down the bottom, then N6, and then we'll finish with our N4 at the top. Now for our door handle, we're going to use T4, which will be our darkest color. Blend that out with the T2, and our final color will be our T0. And because I just want to keep this pretty simple and quick and we're not grabbing out a heap of colors, I've grabbed the T's, and I'm going to be doing the actual door step that color as well. So I initially put that darker color at the top of that doorstep, but I think I want it at the bottom because that will most probably be the darkest away from the light. Blend that out with the T2 and then finish off with our T1. And I do go over that again off camera. Now for the bowl, I'm going to use my E markers, and I'm also going to color the inside of our mat. So E37, blend that out with the E35, bring out the E33, and we'll finish off with the E31. And then for the kind of wrap around the mat, I'm just going to use those same red markers we used for the door. So obviously the closest to the door will be in shadow with the R89. Blend that out with the R29, the 27, and finally the R24, which will be the lightest color at the front of our mat. Just working little flicking motions to make sure we get a nice blend. Now I've just kind of put in where our little path leading up to our doorstep will be with the lightest of my end markers, and obviously the step will be throwing a shadow onto that path. Blend that out with the N6 and our final color, the N4, and that way you can see that sentiment through those colors as well. And now we'll pop in a little bit of grass, so obviously the house will be throwing a bit of shadow. So I've got the darkest color, the BG99 and the BG96 closest to the house, and then blend that out with the G46. The G43 is next, and then our final color will be the G40. So just kind of doing little flicking motions and little round motions to make sure we get a nice smooth blend. Now we're going to create our ATC cards, so I'm just going to go along all the score lines, so just gently fold them and then just grab out my Teflon bone folder to reinforce those folds. This card, like this little book, it folds so nicely. The score lines are fantastic and make it really easy to construct. So you've got this little opening here where you can slip your little book through, so it actually holds that closed, and you can just see how cute that is. And for the little pocket that's going to hold all of our ATC cards, I'm just going to fold over all those tabs. Again, the score lines are folded really well and make it really easy to get this all folded up the way we want, and just reinforcing that with our bone folder so we get a nice crisp fold. Now you could use liquid glue to get this attached, but I ended up, because I wanted to make sure I could use it straight away, I've actually grabbed out my tape runner and a little block. So I'm just going to peel off my tape runner, and then I just use the block to cut that to size. It makes it really easy to see exactly how much you need and cut that exactly the size that you need, rather than trying to eyeball it and hope that you get the right size. So just line that up and use that block to cut that. Now I always like to use my bone folder with score tape to actually make sure that that's properly adhered, and then it makes it really easy to pull off the release paper when you do that. So now that that's done, I'm just going to get this all lined up, and again it just is really easy to put this together. So just making sure that that's lined up. And then again, I like to use my bone folder to make sure that that's really properly attached to each of those ends. So just give that a quick rub, and now that will not be going anywhere. Now we're going to just line this up, and then I'm going to pop some glue on the back and attach that to our book cover. Now I did put the glue on off screen, and I did forget to actually video that when I actually stuck it down. But again, I'm just grabbing out my bone folder and giving that a really good rub to make sure that that glue sticks really nicely. And then we can actually now attach our front panel. Now I did create my little panel a little bit bigger, but to ensure that it doesn't block that little tab that goes through, I'm going to use some foam tape. So to ensure that I don't put foam tape in the wrong part, I'm just going to use this pencil and just mark out where to not put any foam tape. So initially I was saying that it could be put there, but you'll see that I actually put it in the wrong place once I actually get the foam tape on. I realized, thankfully, before I put it down, that I want it on the left hand side, not the right hand side, otherwise it would have got in the way of that little tab. So I've taken off the release paper. It's really easy to line it up with the left hand side, and there are stitch lines top and bottom to make it easy to center that. And you can see that you can still use that little tab to open and close that book. And this is a finished project for this tutorial. So you can see that beautiful stenciling on the background and that cute picture with the door and the sentiment for the front. And then you can put all your little trick-or-treaters inside, which we'll be creating over the next couple of weeks. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the ATC cards that I'm going to create for this little book, make sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.